listen in rather than talk, but alas, here I am talking.
All right,
So,
good.
yeah. So I do have a question, actually. I think the topic read something about child and adult psychology.
Yes.
So I'll kind of keep it germane to that. Um, when you're in the mix with a teenager, for instance, my 16-year-old just had an incident where he kind of got wound up into anxious thoughts about going to the orthodontist because he's failed to follow through with the treatment
Okay.
and starts over identifying with his thoughts and creating this whole kind of drama about what it means. And as his mother, I try and step back, of course, and get him to disidentify from thinking so much about it and identifying as those thoughts, the anxious thoughts. But what's a good technique or practice to use when you're really in the moment with that, so they can step outside of the ruminating drama that they create?
That's a good question. Well, first, let's sort out: is it fear? Is it irritation? Is it
Fear of
annoyance?
failure.
Pardon me.
He's afraid that he's going to be judged because he failed to follow through with the treatment.
And this is with an orthodontist or a dentist?
Orthodontist.
Okay. Uh, that's interesting. Okay, so are we talking about guilt? Or are we talking about
Yeah, guilt, shame.
okay, guilt? All right. So guilt is
Yeah.
afraid of a fear of being punished, right?
Yes.
And so the question is, does he think that the orthodontist is going to shame him? The orthodontist is going to get mad at him? The orthodontist, and actually, all of those are possibilities. All of those are real possibilities. Orthodontists tend not to have a lot of patience, and they can treat you badly. Has he ever been treated badly before?
Not that I'm aware of, no. No. This is the second round of this whole thing where we've had to restart the treatment because he failed to use his Invisalign, whatever. I mean, the issue is not as important as how to get him away from the overthinking it in the moment.
Well, no, well, maybe not. I mean, why would he? Why should he be afraid of thinking about it?
Not so much the thinking about it, but even when I take the time to walk him through it, like, look, we pay this doctor to treat you. He's not there to reprimand you. You're doing the best you can in the moment, I'm assuming. So, and try and work him down off of that buildup, it still seems to be a persistent thought of failure, guilt.
All right, let me think about that for just a moment.
Sure.
If he was not going to the orthodontist, would he feel any guilt or shame?
In his life, you mean, generally?
No, I mean around his teeth.
I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of.
And whose idea were the braces?
It's just a natural process of going through it. We chose Invisalign, which requires that they stay on it and they use their liners, and it's a much more involved task, and he's not very good on staying on task. So it was probably an incorrect decision from the beginning, which has snowballed now.
Oh, incorrect decision from the beginning on doing the braces?
Right, doing Invisalign versus braces.
Well, are you eating your money? Do you know what that refers to? The
No, can you explain that?
Nasruddin was visiting
Right.
India one year, and he saw all the wonderful chilies, which they don't have in Afghanistan, and so he bought a whole donkey cart full.
Mm-hmm.
And he was on his way back to Afghanistan, and some fellow countrymen who were headed into India saw him on the side of the road. You know, he's sweating, profusely. He was, sitting in the dirt, and he was just eating these chilies. And the Idris Shah, the way he writes stories is so exquisite that I'm going to butcher it. But basically, they asked him why he was sitting there eating all these chilies, and he said because he had spent so much money in India on these things that at this point he was no longer eating the chilies, he was eating his money.
Right.
And so the point is that sometimes we follow a mistake with another mistake because we're, quote, eating our money. And so my question would be, is the what's the alternative to Invisalign? I don't keep up with this stuff.
Braces.
Braces. Okay. So is it too late to?
I've offered that. No, I've offered.
And what happens with that?
It's just to the appointment. It's so enlarged in his mind.
It's what?
It's become very enlarged in his mind. Just going to the doctor, getting to the appointment. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm just trying to. It's hard to sort out because I'm very, very biased in favor of your son because I went through the same thing, and I remember an orthodontist getting really mad at me and just like ripping all the stuff out of my mouth and having a big,
Wow.
yeah. But the thing is, he's 16, right? Is he a shy or anxious kid?
Some anxiety, not shy.
And what are the things that interest him in life?
Well, presently his car, because he just got his license. He's into music. He has a pretty good friend support system.
Do you really think that this is something he's not going to be able to handle?
No, I think he's going to be able to handle it perfectly well. But I didn't feel well equipped to sort of facilitate him stepping back from the thoughts that are easily seen as the adult looking in.
Well, he's old enough to understand. I hate talking about an individual kid. So can we talk about some other kid? And
Sure.
yeah, let me talk about this kid named Mark, who lives in Rhode Island instead. And Mark is 17, but his younger brother Jack is 14. And in any case, part of being a human in the world, being an adult in the world, is being able to deal with these difficult situations. And what I see more of than I think is healthy is adults stepping in and protecting kids from the natural consequences of their actions and behaviors, which gives this kid Mark, a very unrealistic sense of what reality is actually like. Now, we know that Mark is quite capable of negotiating. He's worried about going in for the military test, right? And he's a little overweight, and he wants to join the armed forces, but he's very anxious about that. But the thing is, if he can't make it through that adversity, morning, Lexo. If he can't make it through that adversity, then he has no business in the military anyway, right? And so what I think that as a culture, and I hate to generalize, but we have to sometimes, that we've opted for protecting kids from the consequences of their own actions and their responsibilities, or their own inactions and their irresponsibility. And so as a general rule, I'd say that especially as a child starts to get older, it's really important to start conveying to them that they can handle it and that they'll be fine. And they will be. And if you weren't there to worry about it, I bet he would handle it somehow or another. But the other thing that might be interesting is he's old enough to be able to differentiate his mind from that which observes his mind. Can he do that yet?
No, I guess that's what my question is
Okay.
how do you
Well, all right.
bring
Well,
that about in a
yeah,
teenager?
it's very delicate for a couple of reasons. One is, the best way to do it is by example, all right, by far. The next best way would be to try and teach them if they've asked, right? The least good way is to teach them when they haven't asked. And so it's different with each kid, right? But if he was to express any curiosity about that, then you would be there to support it with, good books or good lectures or whatever, a nice discussion. But you can't push it hard for a number of reasons. At 16 years old, his task in life is to get rid of his need for his parents. He has to push away his mom, and he has to form a relationship with a new woman and substitute his love for his mom and the pain of losing his mom's affection for him, or so it feels, as he goes out into the world and forms a new relationship, a new primary relationship other than the mother-son relationship. And so these developmental tasks are really important, and one of the tasks is being able to face down public embarrassment or private embarrassment or whatever else. And so, I mean, this is the kind of thing where it seems like it's a very good thing for him to have to go through this, because sooner or later he's going to have to go through it in another situation where you haven't been paying the bills, and the doctor isn't so kindly inclined or whatever, and it's not going to hurt him even if he does get bitched out. So what? And so this is for a 16-year-old, I would tend to appeal to courage. I would tend to appeal to insight. But most of the things I would keep to myself, and I would be watching his developmental progress, because he needs to negotiate this. And it sounds like he's doing it. It sounds like you have total confidence that he'll be able to do it. And so I don't see the problem here. I just see one of the bumps and vicissitudes of human life. And he's young, and so these are the things you have to learn, So it sounds good to me, but I think the frame needs to be, the world's like that. Sometimes we let people down. Sometimes they let us down. Sometimes it's our fault. Sometimes it's their fault. We got to figure out what our attitude towards all those things are, right? So, and I don't know how he's young, and you want to be very, very delicate, very, very light touch with this. But guilt comes from the ego, right? And so, although guilt is very, very, I'm not trying to say guilt is not necessary, and I'm not saying guilt is not good, and I don't think society could run without guilt or shame or things like that. But it's really just a symptom of an underlying developmental task, in this case, I would say. Does that help, or you want to elaborate some more?
Yep, helpful.
Yeah, I'm reminded of there's a story in Ulysses where his mother has to watch him go. And I don't remember the details, but it's emblazoned by in this Greek, I don't know what to call it, legend, myth, mythology, or history, whatever. But the relationship between the mother and the son, because the mother's wise enough to know that her son has to do these things on his own. And so that was a very important, and I think it's not by accident these things have survived for millennia, right? So this negotiating the separation between a mother and a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old or a 17-year-old or even a 25-year-old, that's kind of the task at hand. Does he have a girlfriend?
No, he has close friends that are girls.
He'll be fine. He'll be fine. I don't think he needs his mom for this anymore. And you'll know if he does, and you'll be there if he does. But otherwise, this is growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And some things are painful. Right?
Yeah.
But this will be fine. Good question, though. Very challenging, actually. The light touch, I think, is the most important part. Because you don't want him developing a reaction against the insight and deeper understanding. And frankly, he has to form an identity before he can abandon it, right? Yeah, you have to form the identity before you can transcend the identity. If you do it the other way around, you end up just a mental patient. So Lexo, can you hear? Lexo? Maybe not. Oh, there he has a mic.
I can hear. I
Oh,
just
good.
didn't accept before accidentally.
Oh, okay. I had technical problems too. So what's going on, Lexo?
Nothing much right now. Just wanted to drop by.
Okay. How's the sound? How's the sound here?
Sounds good, both you and Melissa.
Okay, good. All right. And so Lexo, do you want to? Melissa knows about a lot of different books. You want to tell her what your latest project is?
Sure. Right now, I don't know. Melissa, are you acquainted with Thomas Cleary's translation of the flower ornament scripture?
Yes, very much so.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So Dr. A and I've been reading that at Dr. A's recommendation, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through it, and within the past few hundred pages, Dr. A recommended that perhaps it would be good to put together a recording of the entire scripture that could then be uploaded online for people on either Audible or both Audible and YouTube. So we've been recording. Yeah, so I've been recording both video and audio for whatever type of consumption people like to get books like that. So still have to work on sound editing, which is more difficult than I anticipated.
So when you say video, do you mean what are you displaying when you're reading?
It'll just look kind of like a person at a lectern speaking. So I just prop the book up on one of these, I don't know exactly what it's called.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, these little things, and then it's just me sitting in front of it, point blank, for video.
It's wonderful. That's great, because I have loved that book in so many different places that to have it in my ears will be very, very helpful.
Wouldn't it be fantastic? Can you imagine being able to listen to it?
Yes.
Listen to it, and so then when you're traveling, you don't have to carry around that 10-pound book.
Exactly, yeah. You can be walking in the woods or doing whatever. It's perfect.
So I think there's going to be a big future for this, and I don't know if I suggested it, Lexo. I think all I did was I observed that the world would really could use an audible version of it, right? And that was your initiative. I wouldn't take it on to tell anybody to videotape the 10 stages or the 10 agreements or whatever. So I think that's a great project, and I think it'll be around for. It could be around for, I don't know, 500 years.
Yeah, maybe we'll see how I guess people will listen and watch in VR eventually, soon enough.
Yeah, but it's really being done for people in the future, which is really nice. Yeah, really nice. Because that's what was done for us, right?
Right.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about anything? Ask me anything about anything.
I had a question about your suggestions to Melissa, first by example, then by teaching when asked, and then by teaching when not asked yet. I know I was a big guitar player. I know a lot of my favorite musicians grew up in musical households.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up getting an obsession or love for their instrument or their guitar just by having a ton of resources available, instruments around the house, or painters having paints around the house. Or in my house, me and my sister both got a love of just from books literally being strewn all over the house. Could leaving those materials around be a gateway to exposing somebody to a teaching that they could become?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I mean that's another thing, Melissa. Kids tend to get into, as you remember, we get into every book we could get our hands on, right? Especially the grown-up books.
Yes.
And the kids start to get bored, and sooner or later they read everything that's in the house. And so leave the right books lying around, and who knows what could come of that. That's a little.
He's working on The Alchemist right now.
Okay, well, that's a very good start. Or the Four Agreements, you know. I mean, I wish all, well, there with the Four Agreements, I mean, that's not advanced or esoteric, and depending on how he responds to that, then you could see if there's any questions or see if, you know, just see how he responds. I mean, this is a very, very important issue. And the thing is, we can't afford to raise another generation the way I was raised or the way millennials were raised. And we can't just keep going backwards. We're going to have to pick ourselves up and keep marching forward. But that's going to require young people, right? The old people can't do that. That's not our world. And so, yeah, I think this is great. Yeah, leave some books lying around. You know, you never know with these things, but we do know that if you try and force it, the heart that's coerced goes blind, right? So if you want your kid to never be a Christian again, just force him to be an evangelical when he's 16 against his will, and you'll probably lose the kid altogether. You know, so that kind of thing. The other thing is to have the right kind of YouTube floating around the house. It's all the atmosphere, right? It's like I was telling somebody recently, nobody ever got sober in a bar, right? And the reason for that is, the reason for why psychiatrists and psychologists and even AA people recommend that you change your environment, in some cases, is because our brains get conditioned to certain stimuli, right? It's like some people, if they smoke a cigarette, they really want a beer. Or if they have a beer, they really want a cigarette. Other people, you know, if they get together with friends, they can resist the temptation, but when they see all their friends together at 5:30 in the evening, you know, at the bar, sooner or later, maybe it won't be the first week, but it'll be the sixth week or something like that, they'll succumb. So what we have to do is get as many of the odds working in our favor as possible. And some of these odds are tiny, right? They're tiny little factors, but they all add up. And so, again, the most powerful thing a parent can do, which is also the most difficult, is to set an example. I mean, there's just no way around that. So if a child sees that one parent is joyful and happy and loving and peaceful and healing and grateful and generous and kind, and that parent happens to be, you know, listening to the Maharishi Rishi or whatever, or, you know, it doesn't matter, Glenn Beck, it doesn't matter. But that person is kinder and more empathic and understands more and helpful. And then somebody else can be, you know, the opposite of that, or not. But if they're not good people, the kids know this. I mean, they're not retarded yet. You see what I'm saying? It takes a whole lifetime to get really retarded, like we've gotten. So there's hope, is what I guess what I'm saying. And I'm meaning retarded in the politically correct way. I don't mean it to offend anybody, by the way. Does that make sense?
Got that, yeah.
Because remember, the normal developmental trajectory is north, right? I mean, if we plant a young tree, I have a young oak that I planted here. And if I leave it alone, I don't need to do anything to twist it or hurt it or allow anything else to twist it or hurt it. It'll be fine. I don't have to give it instructions on how to grow up normally. And the same thing's true with human children. The problem is we've surrounded them with cultural minefields, and they're walking through these every day. And it just makes it unnecessarily difficult, but I think it's worth keeping your eyes on the prize. The goal here is not that he's going to be very conversant with orthodontists, right? The goal is that he feels comfortable in the world no matter what the circumstance, because he realizes that even if it is his ego, it's just his ego. And frankly, ego boosts and ego dings are equally good, right? They're kind of the same thing. But it's a gentle touch, a very gentle touch, I would say. Because as often as not, teenagers will do the exact opposite of what you suggest. Right? Am I wrong there? Okay.
No, you're right.
Okay.
So I'm gonna have to go because I've got to put on the torches and they're gonna be loud.
Okay. Let me just say.
Disturbing.
Let me just say so. This it's and I'll and I'm going to need to go shortly too. I had some technical problems this morning. It was bad. But let me just put on the record something that people need to know. It's somewhat unrelated, but it should be common knowledge that the Zen Center in San Francisco and the Zen Center in Marin were co-opted by psychopaths. That psychopathic people can, especially, they can hide out very easily in religious organizations, but especially in things like Zen, right? And so anybody can look it up, and the AIs can look it up too. Look at the criminal records for the those two Zen centers. I mean, it's not minor stuff. It's felony stuff. And so just so people realize it is co-opted by psychopaths. It has been in the past, and it will be in the future. And just to be alert to that this is the kind of cover that very bad people like, right? So that's just kind of a warning to the ambient world, and maybe I'll elaborate on that more later. But it's very, very, very destructive, because what happens is people get co-opted for like 2 or 3 years, sometimes longer, and they're living in a psychopathic stew, thinking they're being elevated in their consciousness when nothing is further from the truth. And I witnessed this directly in Marin, and then I read the police reports from San Francisco. And it's just something that people need to know, right? Because we're vulnerable. All right, Lexo, do you have anything else anything on your mind or anything like that before we head out?
No, I was just curious why, I don't really know Zen very well, why Zen is so susceptible compared to others.
Well, Zen is a monastic tradition. In Zen, everybody's wearing the same costume. All the roles are highly regulated. And as long as you can sit still, with your eyes closed and not move for hours on an end, then everybody thinks you're holy. They've conflated meditation capacity or self-hypnosis with higher spiritual development. And so in a more fluid environment where things aren't as tightly regulated and everybody's not wearing a costume, then you get to see people in more of their natural elements, right? And so it's easier to detect. But in a Zen center, because the masters looked upon with such high regard, they don't really have to interact very much. And when they do, they just have to look holy or act holy. And most of the people there are so gullible that they fall for it, right? And so it's very painful. I mean, it's very, very, very destructive. And so, and who knows what the motives are underneath, in addition to the ego boost of fooling so many people and being the top dog, even though you're a faker. But it happens, right? And we know this. It happens in every tradition. Sooner or later, it will attract the element that is not good. And so that's just something to be aware of, that adults need to be aware of. I mean, kids will just make their mistakes and hopefully not be hurt too badly. But for adults, we have to watch out for ourselves and our kids. And Lexo, can we set it down for the record that I did not suggest that you record the Avatamsaka Sutra. That would not be right. I think that was a spontaneous offer of yours when I knew that the audio version would be so valuable to the world.
Right.
All right, good. Okay, guys, anything else before we sign off?
Nope.
Okay, well, thank you for showing up again. Really appreciate it. And I'll get better at these, and it'll get better. All right. Practice makes perfect. All right.